Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. It's time to take note about the European Union and the United Nations Capital Development Fund and how that particular initiative is going to boost agribusiness across the country. I have two guests who will be helping us understand how this is unfolding, but before I introduce them, let's just go through our preamble. African economic prospects for long-term sustainable growth are under threat from weaknesses in core conditions that are necessary for competitive and productive economies, despite outwardly healthy-looking growth rates in many parts of the regions. The African Competitiveness Report is not good reading. In view of Africa's young population, labor-intensive sectors must play a larger role in the continent's transformation in growth services, both in terms of GDP and employment, to propel the continent's growth. With us in the studio is Deus Tirwakunda. He is a START Facility Manager at the United Nations Capital Development Fund, START being the acronym for Support to Agricultural Revitalization and Transformation. Many thanks for joining us. And many thanks for joining us too, Cristina Banuta. You're the Program Manager, Access to Finance, EU Delegation to Uganda.
Thank you.
You're most welcome, lady and gentlemen. Let me begin with the lady. What inspired the European Union and the United Nations Capital Development Fund to renew their collaboration with Uganda, specifically focusing on sustainable agriculture growth?
So thank you very much for having me once again. I'm delighted to be here. I think first of all we need to acknowledge the importance of the agricultural sector for Uganda's economy. Sure. The agricultural sector represents 24% of GDP, 75% of the exports, and provides livelihood for 70% of the population. So from this perspective, it is a huge sector of the economy, and obviously the European Union wants to focus on it. However, to fully realize the sector's potential, we need to go beyond simply producing raw agricultural products, and we have to focus on value addition. And this is a message that came out very clearly from the President of the Republic at the Uganda EU Business Forum. Now, if we look at agribusiness SMEs, so the ones that actually add value to raw agricultural products, they also form the backbone of the economy because they employ 2.5 million people. Yet they grapple with many challenges, such as lack of records, lack of capital, poor management, lack of collateral, and this is impeding their growth.
That's right.
And them employing more people and buying from more smallholder farmers. This was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is exactly what the START facility that you were mentioning is trying to address. We have already had the START facility active over the last 5 years in northern Uganda, and basing ourselves on the very successful implementation in that part of the country, where 50 agri-SMEs managed to access 13.5 billion shillings in the form of grants and concessional loans. We also have created a market for 120,000 smallholder farmers. We have decided to expand the START facility to the entire country in this phase 2.
Okay. When you talk about expansion, and this one I'm going to have to stay with you still, expansion of the facility talks about phases. That means you're going into phase 2. How different is it from phase 1, especially in fact of the realities on the ground, competitiveness across the agribusiness sector within the continent, and Uganda in particular, has stagnated despite the high productivity initiatives that are ongoing. So what's the difference between the phases?
Yes. first of all, let me, we're basically making the facility bigger and stronger.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So it will, its objectives are to strengthen the capacity of the agribusiness SMEs to actually conduct their business. And this includes digital solutions that will be implemented in this phase 2. So digitalizing the entire business processes of the beneficiaries. We would put much more emphasis on improving the technical capacity of agribusiness SMEs to develop bankable and green projects that can actually be financed by the financial institutions and through alternative financing mechanisms. And we would look at unlocking affordable medium-term financing for agribusiness SMEs involved in value addition and promoting green solutions. So this is the objective of this phase 2. It was partly also the objective of phase 1 with some small differences. In terms of target, we will be looking at supporting not 50 agribusiness SMEs, but this time 300 agribusiness SMEs throughout the country in accessing financing, with an aim of creating 1,500 direct jobs and of bringing into the supply chain 250,000 smallholder farmers, out of which at least 40% will be women and 30% youth. And this will unlock, at the end of the project, approximately 115 billion UGX. So it's a much bigger, much more ambitious project that we're looking at right now. In terms of differences, as I've mentioned, phase 2 is countrywide. The agribusiness SMEs that we will be focusing on have to empower vulnerable populations such as refugees, women and youth. We will also focus on SMEs from least developed regions in the country such as Karamoja, and also on promoting green solutions, green business solutions. The business development services that the facility will offer to beneficiary SMEs will be much more comprehensive than in the first stage, because we've discovered that this is really something that is needed much more than we initially thought. The financing range of this new phase will be from 50 to 900 million shillings, as opposed to the first phase where the amounts were a bit smaller. We will have much more implementing partners in terms of financial institutions and business associations involved in the actual implementation of the project. And another notable difference is that the call for applications will be live throughout the year. So the facility will be able to receive applications throughout the year.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'm sure you touched on some of the aspects, especially in your last submission, that Mr. Deus Tirwakunda, as START Facility Manager, is pretty much dealing with. Small and medium enterprises across the country continue to grapple with challenges of financing, and any initiative that seeks to attend to that particular problem is very welcome. However, the dynamics are usually a bit controversial sometimes. Who benefits, what, and at what point do they get to actually meet these particular thresholds that you could be putting in place? Why don't you take us through that?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for having me. And that's a very good question about the SMEs that can benefit. So the facility is open to SMEs that are in agribusiness in Uganda.
That's right.
And like Cristina mentioned, earlier on we were focusing on northern Uganda, and now we are countrywide. So all SMEs that are in Uganda are free to apply as long as they are interested in doing value addition and agro-processing. That's one. Two, we want to support agribusinesses that are formally registered. And therefore, the business has to be registered formally, either as a company, as a cooperative, as an association, as a partnership, or even a sole trader, but properly registered.
That's right.
So they have to go through the URSB processes of registration so that they can be considered. 3, we want to support SMEs that at least that are employing people. You've heard Christine mention we want to to have about 1,000 direct jobs, 1,500 jobs. So we want to see SMEs that employ between 2 to 100 employees. And then the other one, we also want to support SMEs that are looking for financing and their assets, their capital base or their turnover is ranging anywhere between 10 million to 500 million. And, but of course, there are some exclusions, Chris. Not every SME, but these exclusions are not really major, and these include 1. So if you are an agribusiness, but you are dealing in processing tobacco or alcohol, we will not support you. We won't consider those agribusinesses. Or if you are an agribusiness and you are dealing in wildlife or products that are banned under under international convention on endangered species, we will not again support you. Or you are doing agribusiness in gazetted areas like national parks, again,
meaning you're endangering
exactly.
Animals and ecosystem.
Yes, if you are that kind of SME, we will not definitely support you. And then to your last question, how does an SME apply or get to be considered? That's an important question.
Because you just told some of them not to apply. If they are dealing in illegal aspects that are considered
but
not within line.
I guess there are not many surely which are dealing in those kinds of things.
That's right.
So if you want to apply, we don't receive handwritten, applications or dropping them at our office in Kororo or on email. We've developed an application portal where SMEs are free to log in and they can submit their application. So if they go to start.go.ug and browse, they should be able to get to register. There are materials there to guide anybody who wants to apply, including videos, animations of how someone can apply, materials to read about the facility, even some questions that are frequently asked and answered. All those materials are there. So an SME is free anytime, and Cristina mentioned that we will be running this throughout the year. Any time of the day and time of the year, somebody is free to apply. And, we expect that once you log into that system, of course you have to provide all the information that we need for you to be considered. You have to make sure you have the attachments that we need, for instance, evidence of registration, evidence that you are licensed, you are paid taxes, you are registered for taxation. You are responsible, doing responsible business. So that's very important. Then, of course, the application has to be in English. So we expect that as you provide whatever information, it will be submitted in English because this is the official language that we use as a country. And also, like Cristina mentioned, it's always out there. Any time of the day, you are free to apply. And as applications come through, we will be working on them, screening them, and going on to help those that can eventually access financing.
All right, that's very interesting. I'm glad that you've been very clear on some of the aspects that usually confuse the average Ugandan SME out there. If you are dealing in products that maybe of endangered species, no doubt you're going to have to rethink. No application for you. All right, let me return to Cristina Banuta. Finally, what are the initiatives the EU is supporting to enhance access to finance? You spoke about bankable projects, and then there is a green, sustainable aspect of it. There is climate change and how many of the businesses are adopting. Is there anything that is slightly different from this particular start facility?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, as we know, access to finance is one of the main stumbling blocks for SMEs. So we have quite a comprehensive portfolio at the European Union of programs and facilities that are trying to cater for the needs of the SMEs depending on their stage of growth and the adaptability of the financing provided to them. So the EU is involved, for instance, in a private equity fund, an impact fund called the Yield Fund, which has already invested in 15 agribusinesses throughout the country. This one provides equity capital as well as debt, for instance, and it's an alternative source of financing. We've had the Start Facility Phase 1, which was there and is now being expanded. We also have a facility which is looking at matching businesses and is sector agnostic, actually. So it's not only looking at agriculture, matching businesses in need of more than $500,000 US to investors from around the region. This is called the Deal Flow Facility, and it's actively looking for applicants throughout the year, just like the Start Facility. The European Union is also invested in the Agricultural Business Initiative, the development side and the finance side. ABI is a quite well-known organization in the Ugandan agribusiness context. So all these facilities form a very nice portfolio that the EU is proposing for the private sector in Uganda.
All right. Ms. Cristina Banuta, Program Manager, Access to Finance at the EU Delegation in Uganda. Many thanks for the perspectives, and many thanks to you too, Deus Tirwakunda, Start Facility Manager at the United Nations Capital Development Fund. I'm afraid we're out of time on this, but do stay with us. When we come from the break, we shall be going into our Kickstarter debate now.